Most people assume medieval buildings survived because they were overbuilt or, just lucky. That belief collapses the moment you compare a surviving 1,000-year-old timber church or barn frame with a modern deck that fails in, 15 years. Medieval builders were not guessing. They worked with wood daily, observed how it failed, and adapted their methods until rot became manageable rather than inevitable. What they understood is honestly uncomfortable for modern construction. Wood does not rot because it is weak. It rots because it is treated incorrectly from the moment the tree is cut. If medieval timber could survive centuries without chemical preservatives, the problem is not the material. The problem is the method. Medieval builders understood rot as a process, not a flaw in the wood. Rot was never viewed as an unavoidable fate. It was a biological reaction that could be slowed or accelerated depending on how wood was harvested, prepared, placed, and maintained. Fungi require three things: moisture, oxygen, and food. Medieval construction quietly removed at least one of those factors at every stage. Modern construction, by contrast, often traps all three inside sealed assemblies and hopes coatings will compensate. The way medieval wood was harvested removed decay before construction even began. Trees were cut seasonally, almost always in winter. Sap levels were low. Sugars were concentrated in the roots. Insects were inactive. This meant freshly cut timber already contained fewer nutrients that fungi feed on. Today, lumber is cut year-round, rushed to mills, kiln-dried aggressively, and installed immediately. In medieval times, wood was allowed to rest. Logs were left to season naturally, sometimes for years, which let internal stresses relax and gave volatile compounds time to dissipate. A practical application is actually quite straightforward. If durability is what you're after, it's best to choose lumber cut during dormant seasons, or, allow green wood to air season slowly under cover before you use it. Medieval builders focused on removing food from the wood rather than trying to poison it later on. Soaking timber was common practice all across Europe. Beams were submerged in rivers, ponds, or bogs for months at a time. This process leached out sugars and starches without damaging the structural fibres, but it didn't waterproof the wood. Instead, it made the timber biologically unappealing. When that timber dried, rot organisms found little to consume. A modern version of this method involves submerging untreated wood in cold water for several weeks, then allowing long, shaded drying with ample airflow. Structure mattered more than surface treatments. Now, medieval buildings were actually designed to keep wood dry through clever geometry, not chemicals. Roofs extended far beyond the walls, you see. Timber rarely touched the soil at all. Posts would sit on stone plinths, and water was always guided away from joints, rather than being sealed inside them. These days, modern buildings often do pretty much the opposite. Wood ends up buried in concrete, wrapped in impermeable membranes, and sealed so tightly that any moisture from condensation or tiny leaks just can't escape. Medieval builders, well, they just assumed water would arrive sooner or later. So they designed their structures so the water would leave quickly, rather than trying to keep it out entirely. So medieval wood could breathe, and, well, that breathing actually prevented decay. Airflow was absolutely central to durability. Instead of being sealed tight, walls were layered. Floors, you see, were raised. Roof assemblies allowed air to circulate beneath their coverings. All this meant moisture could evaporate before fungi ever had a chance to colonize. Now, in modern construction, we often equate airtightness with durability. But when moisture gets trapped, rot can accelerate, and it does so invisibly. So, to apply medieval logic today, it's important to prioritize ventilation gaps, raised assemblies, and drainage paths, even when, modern codes might emphasize sealing everything up. Fire was actually used strategically, not just as a destructive force. Surface charring hardened exterior timber and removed sugars from the outer layers. This, in turn, reduced water absorption while still maintaining breathability. Charred wood would dry rapidly after rain and, interestingly, resisted insect attack. Unlike modern coatings, char did not crack or peel. It aged gradually and predictably. This technique can still be used on fence posts, cladding and exposed beams with controlled scorching and brushing. Maintenance was assumed, not avoided. Medieval buildings were inspected, repaired, and adjusted regularly. Failing components were replaced early, Wood was allowed to age visibly, which made problems obvious before collapse. Modern construction, on the other hand, hides wood behind finishes and insulation. Rot advances unseen until, structural failure forces costly intervention. Durability improves when materials remain accessible and honest. So why does modern wood fail faster, even though, we've got all this advanced technology? Well, industrial building these days really favours speed, uniformity, and, honestly, as little labour as possible. Chemical treatments are used to replace the passage of time, and sealants sort of take the place of thoughtful design. But when those systems break down, moisture gets trapped inside, and rot it accelerates way beyond the point of recovery. Medieval builders, on the other hand, worked a lot slower, but they actually aligned their construction with biology, climate, and, the natural behaviour of materials. Well, the result is still standing. So, what medieval wood teaches modern builders and survivalists is actually quite interesting. Wood lasts when it can dry, and it survives when its food is removed. It endures, when structure, airflow and maintenance work together. The difference between medieval longevity and modern decay is not really a mystery. It is, quite simply, method. If this kind of grounded historical knowledge matters to you, then, subscribe to History Vault. Share this guide with fellow history enthusiasts and builders and help preserve the techniques that outlasted centuries while modern shortcuts continue to fail.